We are going to start with the way we've started every single one of these, by having our mayor say a few words and welcome everybody to the neighborhood leadership training. This is the last training in this four-part series, so we really appreciate you all and the many faces that have been here for all of the sessions, or as many of the sessions as you could be. We really appreciate it, and thank you guys. So right now, I'm just going to turn it over to Mayor Dean.
Well, thank you, Courtney, and good morning to everybody. And it's great to see this level of participation throughout the four-part training program. And before I go any further, I want to say thank you to the Andrews Institute for Civic Leadership's alumni for making this training possible. Linda Peek-Schecht, who runs that, and those alumni volunteers have given their expertise to the neighborhoods of Nashville, and we appreciate that. So to show our appreciation, we want to give them a certificate, and we have one here for Linda, and I want to thank her. And this, a mayoral certificate, if you have this and you have about $3, you can go to Starbucks and you can get coffee, and it's really... I also want to present a certificate to Stacy Levine with the Institute's alumni, and we're also giving her certificates for Colby and Jamie to thank you. I hope all of you join the Nashville Next process to participate in the community conversation around the Nashville plan. They just released the draft plan yesterday, and I encourage you to leave your comments on the draft. I know today's session will focus on affordable housing, which is a very active topic for all neighborhoods on the survey and a popular topic for our growing city. One of the best qualities about Nashville is our unique culture. That culture is constantly fueled by creative and diverse energy that is seen in each of our neighborhoods, and that's why it's so important that we continue to invest in our neighborhoods. We have to continue to build community centers that serve our neighborhoods, like this great one here at East Park Center. We can now say that we have regional community centers in every regional area of Davidson County, in Goodlettsville, the Southeast, West Nashville, and Bellevue. We have spent $256 million to date, or an average of about $43 million a year in investments in sidewalks to continue to make the city more walkable, and 90% of those investments have occurred outside of the downtown area. We know that investing in ourselves will provide the funds to help keep our city safer, and we have invested $66 million in capital funds since 2007 in our police department. The department now has 1,431 police officers, which is 170 more than when I took office. We have opened 2 brand new police precincts and remodeled some previously existing ones, or built them new buildings. So we now have 8 precincts, reducing the coverage of each. And the best way for me to describe this is, we created a new precinct in Madison and built a precinct there at the old Peterbilt plant up in Madison, Goodlettsville area. And by opening a precinct in Madison, we basically reduced the coverage of the North Precinct by over 25%. And so each new precinct helps reduce the coverage of the existing precincts. We also, I believe, very firmly have to continue to work on education, and it's been an area that we have worked to protect in the Metro budget even during the recession. Our school system is making progress, and I think it's fitting to note that Dr. Register will leave at the end of June, and he has done, I think, a good job for our city. He has been a strong administrator, and he has been innovative, and he's held it together. We've seen increases in the graduation rate, reductions in dropouts and truancy. School, and you go there now, it's just a different place. And so I'm very, just want to say publicly, thank him for his service. We've done programs like Limitless Libraries, breaking down the walls between the library, our great public library system, and the school libraries. We've worked on the after-school lines, creating after-school opportunities for middle school kids, but we still have a lot of work to do. I mean, the fact is that our district houses 9% of the total schools in our state, and 20% of the state's lowest performing schools are in our district. So education needs to remain a focus, and it is something that I think will remain the top priority for the city for some time. In order to keep investing in our infrastructure, we have to keep expanding the tax base to help pay for public safety, education, and community centers and greenways. We have seen more than 70,000 new jobs created in Davidson County, representing private investments totaling about $3.5 billion. More than 350 companies here have expanded or relocated during the last 7 years. We, of course, made a major investment in the Music City Center during the first term, during the recession. And the way I look at it, the building's been a tremendous success in terms of where we are, in terms of collection of hotel-motel tax that is used to pay for the building. We're about somewhere between $25 and $30 million ahead of where we projected to be. The city has been really incredible. Even before the building opened, the city was setting records for hotel-motel tax collection and for occupancy and for tourism now for about 4 or 5 years, and I think that will continue. If you built that same building today, it would probably cost $50 million more than it cost to do it during the recession. Those investments, I think, will allow us to continue to expand our tax base, which allows us to improve our neighborhood. The map that we have here is this one here.
Yes, right here.
That shows the population density of Davidson County layered with the investments that we've made since 2007. For the Music City Center, to the Nashville Zoo, to the Southeast Regional Community Center, to the Madison Precinct, we're continually putting those tax dollars to work throughout Davidson County. Together, we've taken steps to keep Nashville competitive, and I think we are a very competitive city. And you can look at all the different it city stuff and the hot city stuff, but what that means is that people want to live in our city, particularly millennials, and people want to invest in our city. And you'll see the investments take place all over the city. A growing city like ours will experience growing pains. And the issues of affordable housing and workforce housing are complex ones, and you have our expert here with you today. But as a start, in 2013, we introduced the Barnes Fund for Affordable Housing. Those funds are intended to provide stimulus for new affordable housing opportunities in Nashville by providing funding to nonprofit developers. In the first year, the Metro Council approved more than $2.2 million for this effort. The city added the following year another $500,000, and just yesterday we announced the plans for the redevelopment of the old convention center. And as part of that announcement, we've announced that $5 million of the purchase price will go directly to the Barnes Fund, which would be a considerable shot in the arm. The old National Convention Center at 5th and Broadway is a great opportunity for the city. This mixed-use development projected to bring in more than $13 million a year in property tax, sales tax, and other revenues. And of that $13 million, nearly half of that will go to schools. As a city, we have to keep looking at different ways to approach affordable housing, and we continue to identify opportunities for us. And I think if you want more information about the Barnes Fund, just go to barnesfund, one word, .nashville.gov. Today, I hope you walk away from this with more information about investments in our city's neighborhoods. I hope you're able to share stories about what you're doing to make your neighborhood stronger and how we can better connect with the metropolitan government. These meetings, which I've been able to attend, at least the beginning of all of them, is, I think, been very useful. And I want to thank Courtney and the Office of Neighborhoods for getting this done. And let me just conclude that I truly do believe, as the sun comes out, the cold begins to go away, that Nashville's best days are still to come, that there is a lot of great things happening in the city, and a lot of great momentum that we need to build on it and make sure we do it right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Hopefully you guys will take a chance at the break to look at the map, to look at where the investments have been made. It's really important. And one of the biggest points about this training is that there's still a lot more work to do. We really hope that these trainings will help the neighborhoods really kind of pull together and keep Nashville moving forward in a direction where we can keep investing in our city in this way, and keep investing, because that's so important to invest in all parts of the county. So we really appreciate you guys being here, and I'm going to do a quick review of introductions. I know most of you folks, but I'm Brittany Wheeler in the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods. We have Aaron Williams here in the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods, and we are here for you guys. That's our job. Our role in the Neighborhoods Office is to be liaisons and work with you all to improve the quality of life for all of Nashville's neighbors. So we hope that you guys will continue to talk to us from this point forward. Anything that we can do to help, anything we can do to help your neighborhoods, we're here to do that. So that is our office. We do have a website, and that's the website the mayor was talking about on nashville.gov for neighbors. So I really encourage you all to take a look. It's under the mayor's priorities on the mayor's page. We list a lot of information on our website, and that's what he was talking about with the Barnes Fund. There'll be a landing page where information about the Barnes Fund will also exist on our page. So we really hope that you guys will check that out and take a look. We obviously, out of this program, we have launched an actual neighborhood coaches program. And so if you are interested in talking to another neighbor or another neighborhood about things going on in your neighborhoods, what you could learn from each other, please email us at mayor@nashville.gov. Let us know the topic that you would like to talk about, and we'll connect you with a neighborhood coach who is set up to do that. We have a few of them here right now. We have Colleen Gilson over in Hermitage. She is one of our neighborhood coaches. We have Freddie O'Connell. She is doing infrastructure. Freddie is here to help on transit and questions of that. I actually just saw David Morales walk in from Woodbine. He's not actually here just yet, but he was walking in. He's getting some coffee. Gotta calm down. So that's great. So David is here, and he works a lot with bringing old and new neighbors together. So he's also a great resource. A lot of you guys, and I'm just going to do a quick overview. I know most of you have heard this before, but the reason why we brought the departments that we brought with us to this training was because we sent out a survey in November asking you all what you wanted to hear more about from government and how you wanted to be more connected. The top issues we heard were crime and safety, #1. So we started these trainings at the Midtown Hills Police Precinct. The next thing was sort of sidewalk and infrastructure questions and transit questions because of traffic and congestion. So we had those departments with us at the second training. And then the third training was with our planning and codes department, because you wanted to talk more about, those sort of growth type issues that we have as a city. So Nashville Next is actually here, and they just launched their draft plan, which is fantastic. And then the final thing that we heard of the top 6 was affordable housing. So we're very excited here today, and that's actually all the numbers. And before I go into that introduction, let me just tell you that these training materials are going to stay on our website. So if you want to use them in your neighborhood, all of this has been recorded. They will be up. They will be there for you. So it's not coming down. I don't know what will happen in September, but while we're there, it'll be up there for you as a resource. So that's the website for it. So now I'd like to introduce our Metropolitan Development and Housing Agency Director. He came to Nashville, or I should say Metro, in 2013, and he is a veteran. He is a housing and urban development expert, I would say. And we're very excited that he's here, and he is going to talk to you guys a little bit about affordable housing. And then we're going to take a quick break, and I hope you guys will old materials over there on that table, and then we'll come back and So I'm going to switch over on these PowerPoints and bring Jim up to talk to you guys.
Hi, Jim Harbison, Executive Director of MDHA. Our goal today is to give an informational brief from the MDHA perspective on what we do in the city and not display my lack of technical skill. So here we go. Whoops. Okay. Sorry, confusion. So what does MDHA do? Well, first of all, MDHA is not part of metropolitan national government. It cannot be by federal law. We'll cover that in a little bit. None of the land we hold in our public housing sites, our properties, are owned exclusively by us. They are owned in conjunction with federal government. So within that, our mission statement is driven largely by the service we are required by federal law to provide to you. So reflected here is really we do about three major things. Quality, affordable housing opportunities for those people who most lack resources. Supporting neighborhoods, strengthening communities, and building a greater downtown Nashville. There we go. Okay. So how do we do this? I'll start with the part we'll talk the least about today, which is urban development. Urban development is a small section, 7 people. It runs a program under state law called the Development Districts, which have major components, one of which you may be familiar with, the 5 Points Development District if you live here. And in those development districts, in areas where there is economic need for development, we establish in conjunction with the community. We have meetings in Bordeaux, for example, this afternoon, or actually at 10 o'clock. We establish a development district there. And we are given tools, once that development district is created and approved by council, to establish property use controls and design standards. If necessary and if required, exercise the eminent domain, and use a program that you see in the press kind of a lot, the Tax Incremental Funding Program, which provides a boost, not a lot of funds actually percentage-wise in the program, but provides that small amount of incentive to allow certain major development projects to come to fruition. I'm really struggling here, and I apologize. It's not my computer. Well, I was told I might take the questions, right?
Well, the questions are going to happen over here when the departments are all going to be over here. So if we can
So wait at the end and go right up the questions and the answers. Is that what it is?
no, the departments are actually going to be here to answer questions.
The departments need me. I got to stand up.
No, it's maybe Jamie's.
Oh, Jamie. Okay. So my communication, I'm sorry, Jamie's our communication director. I've got another event like the mayor. She'll be here to answer any questions. I didn't say the format. I'm not trying to pick on you, I just didn't know. Our other major development program is called Community Development, headed by Angie Hubbard. So rather, it's about 15 people. And it runs the federal funds under a thing called the Consolidated Plan. Some of you I saw Tuesday night at our public hearings. That's a 5-year plan. Again, federal law governs these programs. You see the acronyms quoted there, and I can really make your head hurt of acronyms, but HOME is a program designed to promote home ownership and affordable housing development. CDBG is Community Development Block Grants. This community receives from the federal government about $5 million in community development block grants. I have a slide to show those tons in a minute. Emergency Solution Grants, which is again supported grants to help develop neighborhoods in the community. And HOPWA is housing for people with AIDS. It's targeted completely on providing assistance and housing for people with AIDS that are homeless. It's regulated by the federal government. There's an 5-year plan published and public comments on. We are in the public comment period now. It ends Monday. We've had 3 public meetings, 2 of which I've attended, and it's been on our website now for about 35 days. So please, I invite you to read that. It's a pretty lengthy document, but we have a following set of PowerPoint slides on our website if you want to know what's going on with those. Our funding levels vary. We are completely dependent on Congress for those funds. Most of the programs are for affordable housing. The vast majority go towards affordable housing. And most of these programs we do not execute. MDHA doesn't actually build the building, run the site. Nonprofits, we're by community organization, Urban Housing Solutions compete on our RFP. We send out a request for proposal. They submit their proposal. We then award them the funds, and they go build the project. Okay, our priorities in the consolidated plan for this year. Number 1, increase the supply of housing. 2, strengthen collaboration with service providers. That runs the gamut from those who provide services for displaced youth to those who provide affordable housing. Access to healthy food choices. decrease homelessness, all the vouchers that work kindly when we get people off the street that are homeless. The in-stop, they come to our section, we provide them a housing choice voucher through this program, and we're able to get them permanent housing. Place-based strategy for community development. Now, the key to this is this program by law has to be tied to census tracts of low income. So those programs are largely focused on areas in North Nashville and to a lesser degree here in East Nashville. Summer youth programs, we provide on a competitive basis $10,000 to $25,000 grants each year for about 15 programs that run programs for summer youth in the city. Housing assistance for those of age, I talked to that briefly. Further and affirmative fair housing choices, we are the chairman of the Tennessee Affordable Housing Coalition, and we're required to check on fair housing and field those fair housing complaints that HUD sends our way for our community. So it's a little bit of an eye chart, but the key point here is, like other funding and federal grants, our funding is decreasing in total numbers over a 10-year run. So we have less money to work with. Somewhat significantly, you see our CDBG, our community grant block grants, we've lost about $1 million, about 25%. We're afraid that trend is going to continue, but we're doing the best we can with the funds we have. Okay, so here's the major expenditures for CDBG this year, and since this is a housing format, I call attention to the middle line. The bulk of our funds this year will go towards housing and the community block grants, as well as our home grants. Okay, so what are we supporting out of community development in affordable housing this year? $5.5 million. You see the opportunities here for those of you that are interested in those. For example, homeowner rehab, which is one of our more popular programs. Homeowner rehab is targeted on homeowners of low income. Last year we replaced 175 HVAC units after the February cold snap in 2014. This year we're on track to do about 105 or so. People apply to the program on a competitive basis. We contract a vendor, replace their HVAC unit. But they have to income qualify with us to make sure that they are below income and they're homeowners. But we'll put $5.5 million in the community this year for affordable housing. So now, for us, affordable housing, in my opinion, is somewhat of an elastic term. People use it in many ways. Everyone has an opinion. For us, it is governed by federal law. So federal affordable housing is very specific. The definition is here. It's 30% of your, first of all, you have to be less than 120% of median income. Median income in Nashville for a family of four is $64,000. So you have to be under 120% to even be considered in a discussion for federal funds on affordable housing, of any of the funds. Second, 30% of your disposable income or less, not more than 30%, is spent on housing. And we determine disposable housing, you see here, total compensation, salary, overtime, bonuses, commissions, paid leave, less deductions for health, insurance, and current personal taxes. So when we have someone that comes in to qualify for our programs, they go through an income validation. They have to bring in all of their financial data. They have to show us all their revenue. They have to show us what their income tax statements were from the previous year. We have a formula to estimate what their state taxes are for their sales tax. And if they then qualify, they can be one of our programs. See, it says mic, it's too much volume, it's not Okay, so what does the income levels really mean in Nashville? So a modest income, still affordable, is 80 to 120%. And this is for a family of four. That would run up to $76,800. That sounds like a lot of money. Some of our rents in Nashville, as people can appreciate, exceed what a family of four can afford at the $76,800 level. In my organization, MDHA, 300 employees, 90% make less than $76,800. They're all great people. They're all wonderful neighbors, but they would all qualify for some form of affordable housing programs that we run. Moderate income, 60 to 80%. You see the numbers. Low income, 30 to 60. This is key because the subsidy levels kick in at 60% for low-income housing tax credit properties. And then very low income is 30% and below. That is our sweet spot. That is our core mission. Those are the people we deal with and work with the most. Okay, now I'm going to do a little bit of a history lesson, which can be a bit boring. But if you want to know why certain things exist in housing, they are rooted in law. and they are rooted in the history of public housing, affordable housing in our country. And the genesis of that was in the 1930s by this young woman, sort of a fascinating person, Catherine Bauer, was her married name. She created a group of people called the Housers. She was a personal friend of Eleanor Roosevelt. And in 1934, she was given $10 million as the newly minted Director of Operations and Information for the U.S. Public Housing Agency, the precursor to the Federal Housing Agency. And her task from the president was find 10 cities, give each of the cities $1 million, and then say to those cities, establish basic contracts for them to build housing to take people out of slums and shanty towns that had low income, very low income, and put them into housing. And she did that in 2 years. Pretty big deal. 8 of those 10 cities, as soon as the contracts were complete, after she left the picture, sold those properties to private folks, who then took the people who lacked resources into their leases and brought in what we would call today market rate people to make money. And there were allegations of money under the table, and no one ever proved any of that. But Ms. Bauer, being a wise woman, goes, aha, now that I am tasked with writing the legislation for the 1937 Federal Housing Act, I will set certain rules to make sure that doesn't happen to us again. First rule, public housing agencies cannot be part of cities. They cannot be controlled by mayors. I'm not saying to beat my chest. I support our mayor. I love our mayor. But I don't work for our mayor. Can't by federal law. Second, any dollar we spend on federal housing, those public housing agencies can't own alone. They will not have control of the land. That's why places like Nance, Suacum, Casey, where my grandfather worked as a carpenter in 1938, that's why they all look the same. I can't move a load-bearing wall. NDHA can't move a roof. We can't redesign anything without permission of the federal government for our public housing stuff. Why? It's the law. It hasn't changed since 1937. And it has a pretty good rationale based in history because of what the experience was with the government in the 1930s. So those key bullets, the last of which is most important to us, is the other commitment was the U.S. government will provide sufficient funds year over year to maintain your properties and operate your properties. And unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, that hasn't panned out. Okay, so let's talk about the major programs. When you see words like Section 8 and Section 9, those discussions are those components of the federal law that apply to the programs we govern. So Section 8 of the Federal Housing Act was established during the Great Society of the Lyndon Johnson administration. All of those programs capped out and were ended in 1999. There are no new Section 8 programs, and they break into 3 large pieces. One is vouchers, housing choice vouchers. 2 is place-based rental assistance, private contracts with private owners between the U.S. government and private owners. And the 3rd is project-based vouchers, where a voucher is tied to a door. I know I'm moving fast. I'm probably going to make your head hurt, and I apologize for that. But the main point to take away is what we do is governed by federal law. So you may desire to change things at the local level, but unless you get a federal law change, you cannot. So let's talk about those 3 big groups. In Nashville today, I think the numbers are coming up, we have over 5,000 units, apartments, of place-based rental assistance. Maybe it's over 7. The numbers are coming up. A bunch. Now that is where the federal government, the U.S. Department of Housing and Development, has a contract with a private owner. And those names will sound familiar to you. Freeman Webb, Gertner, Lawler Wood, Hunt Brothers, Califerro, they go on and on. And MDHA has nothing to do with these properties. Can't. It's a 2-party contract between a private owner and the federal government, in which there is case law that if that contract is not fully funded, that organization is in the federal government has one in court. It's a 2-party contract. And they contract to provide a certain number of units, income restricted at 30% or less, in which the tenant comes in and qualifies and pays $100, $125, $150, and the government pays the difference between that and a number established as the fair market rent. And those stipends can be somewhat generous, $500, $600 a unit, and those are pretty good businesses, and frankly, those properties are generally maintained extraordinarily well. That's one slice. The second slice is the Housing Choice Voucher Program. We run that for the community. I'll show you the numbers in a minute. It's in the 30s of millions of dollars we get each year. We have 7,100 people, and that's where someone that lacks resources comes in. They present all their credentials, we check them, and the income qualifies being less than 30% of median income. They get a voucher, and it is on them with that voucher, which is portable, it can go anywhere in the country, to go find an apartment. I have vouchers in North Dakota. We have vouchers in Hawaii. We have vouchers in Alaska. It's portable. It's a great program. The challenge is not everyone, landlords will take the vouchers, and we'll get to why we really hope we can sell this program to you. If you're a landlord out there, we'd love for you to participate, because our challenge is we run on a monthly basis 100 to 200 people each month with vouchers that can't find an apartment. Let's see, on Section 8, I'm talking, okay, so what we've got up there is Section 8 vouchers. We run this. So I got another piece. The other piece is place-based vouchers. There are very few of those in our community, less than 40, and that's where a door has a voucher tied to it. Someone qualifies and they get a voucher, and then they go get a stipend. But it's not for an individual, it's for the actual location. So I won't talk too much about this program. In this program, which is run by us, so there's the number, 7,481. We do for veterans, Shelter Plus Care, which is largely focused on homeless. We have 32 for homeless veterans, 92 vouchers for people of age. Someone comes in and qualifies, they get a voucher, they go find a landlord. We enter into a three-way lease. MDHA signs the lease, the landlord signs the lease, the person signs the lease. The person provides their $120, $150. We provide the difference between that and a market rate rent established for the local area. Everybody's head hurting good? Whoops. All right. Oh, there we go. Okay, the other one that is the most recognizable one, because people see the properties. Section 9 of the Federal Housing Act, which we talked about its establishment in the 1930s. There are 5,399 families, 5,399 units today on 20 properties. We'll go through those in a minute, but there are ones that will be familiar to you: Casey, Andrew Jackson, Cheatham, Cumberland View, Edge Hill, Parthenon. Those are the ones you see in the community. As for 30% below area median income, and we break those for rentals to those categories. Okay, so our contemporary properties, which we're extraordinarily proud of, some of the best housing stock I'd submit in this nation and certainly in this community. One that I'm personally in favor of. Anybody know where Edmondson Arts Park is over in Charlotte? John Henry Hale. That's our goal for our community, for us eventually to get every site to be that good. But these are our contemporary properties. All of them have been rebuilt since 2000, all of them in tremendous shape. That's about 1,800 of our units. John Henry Hale is a good example. On to our elderly and disabled properties. These are for people with less than 30% of AMI, $19,000 or less, and they must be disabled or elderly. These are Towers, Hadley, over by TSU, Madison Towers in Madison, Parthenon Towers overlooking Centennial Park, and Vine Hill Towers over by the fairgrounds. Parthenon especially is one of our best sites. It's fantastic. We just redone all the interiors of those units, as well as at Gertner and at Madison. Okay. Our elderly-only properties, 62 years or older, you do not have to be disabled. You get an idea of the quality of the apartments. There's one right down here in Edgefield is one of the elderly. We have great success with the residents there, very stable population, and in terms of some of the, pejorative thoughts people have about folks that live in subsidized housing, these are the most peaceful and stable sites you'll ever find. These are just lovely places. If you want to go play dominoes, have a good game of dominoes on a Saturday, go over to Gertner. Okay, our family properties, Andrew Jackson over by Fisk, Casey Place right across from Germantown, Casey Place right up here the street, Cheatham Place right across from Germantown, Edge Hill in the Belmont, Hillsborough area, Napier over towards the Wedgwood area near where the May hosiery mill used to be, Sudicum Apartments right next to Napier, and the neighborhood housing, which is a little bit tough to understand, but we have over 350 separate duplexes and single-family homes that are classified in Section 9 of the Federal Housing Act that are standalone units, and they're all over the city. Our market rate units, and under the Federal Housing Act, we're allowed to have a small number of what are called market rate units, but these are not at the rate of, say, a one-bedroom in Nashville is $1,250. These are not actually at that market rate, but they are slightly higher, and the person that lives there pays the full rent. So that's what we mean by market rate rent. So most of these rents are about $800, $850 a month, but the tenant pays the entire amount. There's no stipend from the federal government. There's a few in John Henry Hale, some in Historic History, Preston Taylor, Levy Place, and Vine Hill, a total of 125 across our enterprise. Okay, and we also own other affordable housing. So we've left the Section 9, we left Section 8. Now we're in those properties that we own separately, where we've made great investments, we think, to try to provide affordable housing in the community. Two that probably stand out in the community, if you know where Rolling Mill Hill is, anyone that goes to the Pinewood Social Club, two sites of their Nance and Ryman Lofts. Ryman Lofts is for artists only, 60 units. You must go for an artist council. You must qualify as some type of artist, a sculptor, a writer, a guitar player, and then you're allowed to come in for restricted income. And this is for 60% of median income or below. These properties are generally funded by the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program run through the state, in which we get a 9% tax credit, market it on the open market, receive a stipend, and use that to decrease our cost of construction. These are our sites, and they're across the city as well. Okay. So I kind of touched on this. So those are what you've seen thus far are the things MDHA controls. What we're going to talk about now is the things we don't control, but we're aware of, because we work with HUD, but we don't have any real influence over. So in our community, I talked about the project-based rental assistance, a contract between a private owner and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, 7,000 units. 30% of AMI or below. The one that's in the media today and most prominent is James Robertson, and we have come in and tried to help out there. I'll go through a little bit of the James Robertson as an example of this program. The contract that a private owner has with the federal government is a 20-year contract, which can be renewed every 2 years forever. Most owners always renew, because when they renew, they get to increase and do a market rate study, the amount of stipend, the amount of subsidy they receive from the federal government. So that allows them to increase their gross revenues. Most owners do that. Some owners, however, because of the location of the property, decide to opt out, to leave the contract, which is their right by law, and then the federal government, HUD, is required to take care of the tenants. So James Robertson is a poster child for this today. The legitimate new owners decided, because of its location, immediately adjacent to the convention center that's being redeveloped, that their business model was best served by leaving the Section 8 place-based rental assistance contract with HUD. Their choice, legit. They notified the tenants. HUD then goes, we have to take care of the tenants under the law, and we have to provide them vouchers. And they have 3 ways to do that. One is to reach out to the local public housing agency and ask them to administer the vouchers on their behalf. 2 is to go to the state agency, in this case, Tennessee Housing Development Agency. 3 is to get a third-party contractor. In most states, and frankly, most of our state, public housing agencies don't touch this. Why? Because no good deed goes unpunished. And all of a sudden, people think that you kicked them out. Now, I'm not saying we did, but that seems to happen with other guys, so they don't do this. Now, we chose to participate. We've worked very hard. We still don't have placement for all these people, and it's a heartbreaking personal situation in some ways, but it is a business decision legitimately by the owner, and we have volunteered with HUD to administer the vouchers and try to find placement for the tenants. The alternative is for Ralph Perry at THDA to do it. They've never done it in the past. The real alternative, since I was the director of HUD before I came to this job, is to go to D.C., energize the third-party contract, to consult and contractor parachutes in for 5 days, and he has to demonstrate that he made a legitimate ability to contact each of those tenants by stapling on the door the notice, taking a picture of it, doing that twice, and if they don't show up for their interview, they're out. So those agencies run 30-40% tenant voucher issue. We're going to get close to 100% tenant voucher issue, and we go beyond that to try to find placement for these people. So we're not there yet. We've got about half of them placed. We've got about 90% of them, roughly 90% of them have their vouchers. Okay, other housing supporting Nashville. Okay, we talked basically about Section 8, PBRA, PBV, housing choice vouchers. MDHA does the 2 bottom ones, private owners do the top. Section 9, classic public housing, low-income housing tax credits. That is a program that we could spend probably an hour discussing the mechanics of it, but the state runs it on behalf of the IRS. And basically the state issues on a competitive basis a dollar amount in credits to a person trying to build an affordable housing site. So I'll use an example. Say you're building affordable housing. Your project costs $10 million. You apply to THDA, Tennessee Housing Development Agency, who then awards you an award of 9% tax credits for 15 years. So they take 9% of $10 million of your construction value, so we'll use $1 million as a rough number, or $900,000. They multiply by 15, so it's roughly $13.5 million. And then you have $13.5 million of tax credits to sell. Now, most of these people are like us. They're private entity, or they're public entities, or they're nonprofits. They don't need IRS tax credits because they don't pay that type of tax. So then you go to a syndicator, you sell the $13.5 million worth of credits on the open market, and Coca-Cola or GM or Ford buys them at about 10 cents on the dollar. So you get about 1.3, 1.5 million as a check on the front end to decrease your cost of the overall project, and you sign an agreement with the state and the IRS that for the length of those credits, you will restrict your rents to 60% of median income. That's how that program works. That's how we built Nance and Ramen. That's how we built most of those projects you're seeing. We are right now have an application in for a 9% tax credit that we hope to build if we receive the credit. It's an active program. It's a good program. But they are private generally. You'll recognize the firms Lawlerwood, Freeman Webb, Alco all compete for these. We compete on an equal basis with them. We talked about the community development programs, which is in the annual plan. I know I see some of the faces I saw Tuesday night, so people are aware of that. Went through kind of the numbers. And that is the main program supporting Nashville. That is 95%, roughly 25,000 families out there that get taken care of every day, 30% or less, most of them, some 60% or less, in our community by these various programs. Okay, I'm going to touch on the home funding. Now, home is a component of the community development slide I showed you long ago. And home and UDAG in the first round, UDAG is Urban Development Action Grants, were funds provided to MDHA that we in turn provided the city to go into Barnes. And so our first go round, we had $3.3 million at home. We got 43 units in great properties. Barnes is a tremendous program. This year we were able to put in about $625,000. I think the city's going to, until yesterday, we're putting in $500,000. Now there's $5 million, and that's great. But this is where nonprofits compete. They come in with a program. They compete in front of a board. They're awarded competitively the award from home, and then they go build. Great program. Additionally, we have, out of our cobbled together from other resources, $1.7 million in gap financing. Gap financing means I came with my project, but to keep it affordable, I'm still not there. I can't get the rents, because all affordable housing has the same components as market housing. You got to get land, you got to get a contractor, you got to get an architect, and you got to pay for it. And today, people pay for it with loans. So if you're going to decrease the amount of rent you pay, you have to decrease that number somehow. And the only way really you do that is either a federal stipend or a Barnes Fund stipend, or in this case, we provide a gap funding for a project to get 240 units out there. Okay, I'm going to touch on this. I thought I sort of misunderstood where we were, but I'm going to touch on what we're looking at for the future, but it is not complete or done. This is just planning. So right down the street here is Casey Homes. We did have 78 acres last time I was in public. Since then, we've bought CWA 1 and 2 next to Casey to assemble land. And we worked with the community before my watch from roughly early 2013 to the summer 2014. And the take with the community was, okay, we don't know where the money is going to come from, but so that we have a plan to start with if we ever get funding. What would you like to see there? So at Casey today, we have 716 units of public housing on 88 acres. And in conjunction with the community, we went through a development program. Some of it was held here. I think the last presentation I gave was at Martha O'Brien last summer. We came up with these major themes, which I think are very consistent with what you've seen for the rest of the community and desires for affordable housing. Preserve what we have, retain key community assets, parks, and other items, improve open space, expand the retail options, and maximize the potential of Casey as a gateway between the 5 Points area and the Shelby Street Bridge. Here's what we did in our community outreach, and I'll get to why this is important to us. You can read the slides, but we have a community action group that's somewhat in hold pattern right now because we don't really have a lot to tell them yet, other than we bought a property trying to assemble land in the program. We will probably sometime this summer give an update. We did a door-to-door resident survey, market assessment. We checked all our conditions, several public meetings, and several community charrettes that led to these conclusions. So what it means is we think, and let me emphasize, we don't have the resources for this yet. Remember, this is public housing land constrained by a federal restriction on the title. But should we ever get that lifted, and we are trying to do so, but it's not in the bag yet, it may not ever be, but we're going to keep working on it. Should we be able to do it, what we hope to do at Casey is park, replace 1-for-1 every public housing unit, minimize dislocation of the residents. Hopefully, if we move anyone, we're going to move them on-site from old to new. And if we can, put some number of new affordable housing into the community that is not public housing. 716 units on 88 acres. We can get more. Now, depending on which architect I hire, that number varies widely. It could be as low as, say, 1,500 when we get another 700 units. Some estimates as 5,000. We don't know. But we're seeking a way to remove the constraint in our title, stabilize financing, and then approach this program as our very first step towards major investments in affordable housing in the community. We don't know what the numbers will be, but we went through a process. Many of you, I think some of you here in the room, see, and hopefully you went to some of that. I think I recognize some faces. And we'll come back and update you late sometime this summer once we know more. But Envision Case is our next step of our land in public housing to try to invest in affordable housing in the community. That's what we think it'll look like. It's always finished with a great hook of a great slide. It is not resourced. I do not have the authority to do it. I am asking to get the authority, and we're chasing the resources. But they are not in our hands yet. But we are seeking that. We brief the mayor on it about once a quarter. And we haven't come back to the community in a long time, really since last summer, because there wasn't much to say. And this, my experience has been in affordable housing, you don't need to jerk people around. I don't want people to think we're going to do something we're not going to do. Right now, we're not going to do it, but we're trying to, and we got to get the resources. So as a summary, MDHA is your vehicle for affordable housing for the lowest of the low income. We're working hard to provide additional resources for affordable housing for other communities, Ryman Lofts, Nance Place. We hope to break ground on 10th and Jefferson this summer on 54 units. We are working hard with the existing old housing stock to find a way to transform it. When we do that at other sites, Envision Casey will be our model for community outreach. But presently, as you see the history of public housing, we are constrained by law to do only the things we can. And within that law and policy, we do everything we can to support you. I thank you for your time. I probably went over. Enjoy your break.
No, you get a break. Everybody's going to stretch. But he was perfect timing, actually. So what I wanted to say really quickly is MDHA has provided flyers on your table, and it's a part of a community engagement process that they're going through right now. So please take a look. Please give comments and feedback. They are looking for that, and I wanted to make sure to flag that for you. Also on the tables is the agenda. So if you guys if you want to take a look at the agenda, that would be good too, and some materials from our friends at Andrews Institute, which she'll go through after the break. So everybody, take a minute, stretch your legs, get some coffee. Coffee is in the other room. Like we said, materials from the previous trainings are on the tables, and if you have not signed in yet, if it hasn't made it over to you, Erin is sending it around, so please make sure that you check your name off and sign in. All right? Thanks so much. Take a break. All right, guys. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know people will be filtering in as we go, but we, as the mayor already announced this morning, we have the Andrews Institute with us that has partnered with us on every single one of these leadership training, and we're so happy and honored to have them as a partner with this. We have Linda Peak-Schacht, the founding director, and Stacy Levine, one of the alumni. We also had two other alumni that made presentations, and we have learned a lot ourselves from them, and we're excited that they're here. One change that I wanted to let you guys know is our map that fell off the wall, which we were, that was fun. So we put it outside on the window. So please take a look if you would like to see kind of where those investments have been made in the city so far since 2007. So without further ado, I am turning it over to Linda and Stacy.
Well, thank you again, and we're excited to be here in our final session. Just as a point of information, how many of you, this is your first session with us? Okay, about a third of you. How many have come to 2 or more sessions? Great, great. And how many came to all 4? Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you for hanging in there with us. And I know that many of you have already gone back to your neighborhood and used some of the tools that we've discussed. But because we have about a third of the people with us for whom this is their first session, I want to do what we've done in the past and quickly review what the 4 sessions have been designed to do. And all of the materials from those sessions are, as Courtney said, posted on the Office of Neighborhood websites. In particular, look on the website for the tools that we gave you as we moved through what we called collaborative leadership, guided by the work of Marshall Gantz. And so we ask ourselves 3 questions that Marshall Gantz says every group, every neighborhood, every organization that wants to organize for change needs to answer. And that first question was, who am I as a leader? You know, who are you individually as community leaders? And that's why we gave you in the very first session the collaborative leadership assessments, so that you could do that self-assessment, perhaps use it with the other leaders in your neighborhood that you are working with, so you could see in terms of the traits of a collaborative leadership where you were strong and where you needed to improve. You'll remember that we focused on 2 of those as really key to the work we were doing over the 4 sessions. And those 2 were, first, assessing the environment, understanding what your neighborhood is and what the assets it has to offer as you create a vision for the future. And that was the second thing that we focused on that collaborative leaders do, and that is that they create together with others in their neighborhood a vision for the future that they can mobilize and organize around. And so on the website for the first 2 sessions are, first, those assessments that you can take individually if you haven't already, use in your neighborhood, and second, 3 different kinds of asset mapping tools that you can use to look at your neighborhood and determine, as we asked you to do last time, what are the historical assets, what are the architectural assets, what are the natural assets, what are the cultural assets, and finally, and most important, what are the human assets that you have within your neighborhood? Who and what do you have to help you first create a vision and then execute around it for the change that you want to see in your neighborhood? So all of those tools are on the website for asset mapping. And then finally, last time, Stacy gave you both some examples and some ways to think about finding the stories in your neighborhood that will help you as you mobilize, organize, and communicate the change that you want to bring about. And we ask you in the first session to go home and map out some assets. We ask you in the second session to not only do that, but to focus on your human assets. And Jamie Dent gave you some tools for how to organize volunteers. And then finally, we gave you some assets, some tools for developing your stories. And we're going to add on that today. And then we're going to do what you saw was presented so well in Jim's presentation about the Metropolitan Housing Authority. What did you see in that presentation that you think would be important as you move toward a vision for the future? There are a couple of things, and I want you to be thinking about these as we ask you about your stories. One is he used visuals, right? A symbol. He showed you a view of the future for Casey with Envision Casey. He was able not only to talk about it, but to show you how it might look. So symbols and photographs and pictures, the things that people gather around, what sometimes is called consensual experience. Right? We are all having collective experiences. We're all in your neighborhood, for instance. If you are Hip Donaldson, who I don't think is here, the farmer's market becomes a symbol of what your neighborhood can do together. Oh, yes, there you are. All right. It becomes a symbol of what your neighborhood can do together. What else did he show? And this is what we're going to do at the very end of today. He showed what happens when you can very easily and with very active verbs set your priorities to reach your goal. If you will remember, he had 5 or 6 priorities for his work. Obviously, one was to increase affordable housing. That was at the top of his list. Another one was decrease homelessness. But there was also foster collaboration among the service providers. So you're going to have, at the end of the day, several priorities that you have to focus on to reach your goal and to create the neighborhood that you have envisioned when you came together and worked on the vision for your neighborhood. So priorities are important. At the end of this session, we're going to focus on next steps. When the rubber hits the road, how do you actually take what you've learned here and go back to your neighborhoods and organize and mobilize around change? Focused on different things, because all of your neighborhoods have different opportunities and different issues that they want to address. And the most important thing is to recognize what is unique to your neighborhood. What works in Donaldson may not work in Green Hills. You know, what works in Green Hills may not work in Edge Hill, because you're at different points in both your neighborhood association development, but also you're at different points in the important things that need to happen in your neighborhood as a foundation for thriving communities. Okay, so we're going to go through all of that at the end, leading you to your strategic priorities and your next steps. But first, we ask you to come with stories today. We want to hear from several stories, from several neighborhoods with the stories, and then we want to talk about how you can turn that story into the persuasive communication that you need for at least one person or one group in your neighborhood. We're going to use a grid called Monroe's Motivated Sequence to actually develop the way that you sell your idea. Some of you will be testifying before the Planning Commission, either pro or con on something. Some of you will be making direct arguments for change to some of the city agencies that you have heard from. You know, others, your very first persuasive argument's going to have to be with your neighbors themselves, right? And so you may have something coming up where you're going to need to make the case at a neighborhood association meeting or with an individual neighbor that you need to make sure is with you when you go into the meeting, right? So this tool, the Motivated Sequence, is going to help you no matter if it's one person or a large group of people, how to make your case using your stories and the vision of your neighborhood that you are shooting for. Okay, so Stacy asked you to come back with some stories of your neighborhood based on people or buildings or nature or culture, and I'm going to turn the mic over to her. You've got one. Oh, good. Okay. I'm going to turn the mic over to her, and we're going to hear from some of you. So first we'll ask for volunteers, and then we have a few people that we're already marked to call on, all right? So any volunteers from the homework that you had to do? Yes. Tell us your neighborhood.
My neighborhood is Woodland Point subdivision, and it's on a peninsula on Piercy Priest Lake. My name is Cynthia Teague. The problem that we ran into is a little bit unique. For a number of years, we've been having serious problems with trespassing for people trying to get to the lake. The way that I solved this problem is it turned out to be an interagency issue. So what I did is I identified the players from the 3 major agencies that could help us solve this problem. And then I got them together in a meeting. We sat down and worked out a game plan to solve the problem. And I'm very happy to say that it actually worked. We have had a lot of success in this area, and we're a lot safer and a lot happier over there.
Great, thank you. Everybody? Is there one story around the use of the lake that is safer now or better now that you could use to make the case for your success?
Yeah. Part of the problem that we were having involved a very heavy use of alcohol and drugs out on the peninsula. And we actually had a resident that was physically assaulted before we were able to get this problem solved. So last year when things kind of came to a head, I coordinated with the local precinct to come out and do an undercover operation. I was in the process of setting up trash bags out on the peninsula to help clean up the trash. Some of you may actually have seen me on TV over that issue. And I actually got caught in the sting operation. They busted 3 people right in front of me.
That's great. That's it. So we care so much that we get caught in stings. I think one of the things that's great about your story is the end result, which is a safer, cleaner lakeside for your neighborhood, right? So you're able to use that natural asset and in a safe, clean environment. And I'd love to hear at some point, and we'll go to some other neighborhoods, but I'd love to hear at some point the arguments that you used. Obviously, you had a crisis with someone being assaulted, but I'd love to hear the arguments that you used with the agencies that got them to work together to come out. So think about that. If we have time, we'll come back to you. All right, great. Thank you. Let's give her a hand. Okay, who else? We have names to call. Good, all right.
Hi, morning everybody. My name is Freddie O'Connell. I'm part of Salem Town Neighbors Neighborhood Association, which is it's basically tucked between Germantown and Metro Center, right off Rosa L. Parks Boulevard. And Lindsay Cox, who's our current association president, couldn't be here today, but I think we've had a pretty interesting story, and she was a huge part of it as well. But a few years ago, so I think to your point, Linda, about not necessarily every scenario works for every neighborhood. I think also a neighborhood's priorities change its story over time. So we had, I've been there for 8 years, and I think a couple of years I was actually less involved, taking some time off to be a dad, but during that period, a group of neighbors concerned about character in the neighborhood got together and started looking at the prospect of doing a neighborhood conservation overlay district, and then also preserving the Fear School building in our neighborhood, which is right at 5th and Garfield, was a civil rights kind of legacy site during desegregation and so forth. And so there was one year, 2013, where we had a whole lot of serious issues going on in the neighborhood, and in some ways it got directly to the conflict that sometimes happens when there are arguments between neighbors. And so I think very intentionally in 2014, after we had gotten through a lot of that, we shifted gears to do some more social stuff, and we had a very active social committee that was focused on bringing people back together. And I think we had watched a little bit of a downturn in concern about crime and safety, so it let the social committee really thrive, and they did things like create this series of happy hour events called Pink Flamingo Happy Hours, where every week somebody would stick
the symbol.
Yeah, so they'd stick a pink flamingo in somebody's yard, and that person would actually sort of have like refreshments out on the lawn, and people could just drop by, right before, maybe right after dinner, depending on how many people stuck around. And it culminated last year in our first ever signature event as a neighborhood, which was a Halloween block party, kind of capturing the Salem part of Salem Town. And it was neat to see the neighborhood shift from let's have a reflective year and kind of do some of the serious work of preserving the character that people love, to then having much more of a togetherness year. And that's evolving further this year as we go into considerations of traffic and parking, as we see a lot more activity to the south, including the ballpark and so forth. But it's also especially neat to be here today and hear other stories, because we're doing our first ever Easter egg hunt, but that was an idea that came from Edge Hill, where Rachel has actually, I think, picked up and is about to run with the Pink Flamingo idea over there. So it's also neat to see how neighborhood stories can start to overlap, and those good ideas can spread.
Right, and that's it. Let's give Freddie a hand. There's so many rich ideas in what Freddie just shared. I mean, the first is that there's some foundational things that have to be in place, right? And we've talked about that because you listed them as the most important things to you. Not just affordable housing that we just heard about that was in the top 10, but also safety. Right? I mean, safety and having a safe environment is almost the cost of admission, right, to be a thriving community. But once you get that in place, and some of you are right now at the very first session, the thing that kicked this off, we talked about how Bordeaux Hills, under Ruby's leadership, had really worked hard to get that safety in place, the safety foundation in place before they move to other things. So, but going back to what Freddie said, once that's in place, it sounds like you then looked at what historical assets you had that you wanted to make sure. Sometimes it's all about timing. So are there assets in your community you're about to lose that are really important to you, that are going to be lost to history because you might be focused on other things? So in Freddie's example, yes.
I want to point out one of the other things that come out as a neighborhood evolves is the leadership of the neighborhood. And one of the things that Freddie failed to mention, that he's going to have to start mentioning more often, is that he is running for Metro Council. and that is...
I was going to mention that for him too, but I decided maybe I shouldn't. Thank you for doing it.
It's directly related to his work in the community, and that's what we want to see. We've got 35 positions to have, and I'd like to see 35 neighborhood leaders be in those positions because they understand what we're doing.
I was going to say, who better understands what needs to happen in your neighborhood than having the neighborhood-oriented council person? So thank you for that, and Freddie, thank you for the leadership in your neighborhood. I want to focus just for a minute on the fact that this is a wonderful training ground for those of you who might want to move on to run for council or to other leadership positions, appointed positions, to serve your entire city. One of the most important things I want to convey to you, and I did in the first session, is that I think neighborhood leadership is the hardest kind of public leadership. So kudos to you for taking it on. I actually refused to run again after I'd been president of my neighborhood association in Maryland many years ago because I wasn't up to it. I wasn't up to dealing with those early morning phone calls where you really needed to deal with the problem in the park and also keep a job. So I want you to know how much I respect you for that. The second is that the hardest kind of public leadership, in addition to neighborhood leadership, is knowing when to make that next step. And so I applaud those of you who have decided, I've been able to do this at the neighborhood level. I now want to move to perhaps an elected position. Okay, let's go back. What symbols did Freddie use? Because I want you to be thinking about symbols for your neighborhood too. He had a great story and a symbol in the school, the role that it played in history, in the civil rights movement. I mean, one of the stories that we love to get our students to understand by taking them to the civil rights room at our public library, which, by the way, is a great resource for you for history about your neighborhoods. Good, yes, okay. So one of the resources, when you get to the point of really wanting to build that neighborhood history, one of the great resources is the public library and the librarians there. So there was that symbol, but then he had another fun symbol, and this is the thing I want you to think about. The symbols you use as you gather people around, one of the things can be fun, as well as call up an idea, right? So I love the pink flamingo idea, and I'm glad another neighborhood is stealing it, and I love that you're stealing the idea of the Easter egg hunt from Edge Hill. Is that who you're? Yeah. Now, and stealing is all right, by the way. Now, maybe I should clarify that since we are on video. Picasso used to say, and Picasso and Matisse kind of took ideas from each other as painters, right? He used to say that some people may steal, but artists appropriate. And so it's okay to appropriate different ideas that could work in your neighborhood. So did you hear anything else from Freddie? I heard that there's a timeline. There's a timeline and there's a cycle. So some years you will really be focused on some serious issues that have to get done. And then once you get that kind of in a way that can be maintained, then have some fun. One of the things that a boss of mine who was not as successful as he wanted to be once said to me is that we didn't take enough victory laps. We didn't take enough time to celebrate the wins. And because we didn't, people couldn't feel good enough about themselves to move to the next step. So you want to make sure that you're celebrating and that you're taking victory laps so the whole world can see, so other neighborhoods can see, so Metro Council can see. One of the things that's important, I think, is when you do get a win, not just to celebrate, but to thank those people who helped you get there. And that includes maybe some people who were against you, but who, in the end, came back around. I really see in neighborhood associations a tendency to hold grudges. And I think it's really important to, and why? The reason is these are the people who live next door to you, right? I mean, you see them every day. You get to be friends with them, and sometimes you can't get over the places where you may have disagreed. And I've heard from some of you that one of the things that you really want to work through in your neighborhoods is how you get over that history. This happened 5 years ago and people are still having a hard time moving to the next step. And I urge you to use the collaborative leadership assessments in a neighborhood meeting to kind of get people talking about how they rebuild trust. Okay, anything else? Give Freddie another hand. And I'm going to ask the timekeepers to tell me when we're supposed to take a break. Or maybe Stacy can help us too on that. Okay, who else? We've got a list, so anybody else? Yes, okay. Tell us your neighborhood.
I'm Casey Summer, and we're Edgehill Village. I'm here with Rachel Gilchester, our president. I'm our secretary. And I think we can relate to a lot of what Freddie was saying. So I'm kind of telling a story about telling stories and what's in progress for us. So we, as a neighborhood are very much in transition, a lot of development pressures, and I think really came together around crime and safety issues. So getting some of the fundamental things in place. And then once we did that, I've been able to do a lot of social events and other fun things. And then in this last year, again, a lot of development pressures. Edgehill's right in the middle of Midtown, near Music Row. And so we found that a lot of our conversations have been about that. And, neighbors sometimes agree and disagree on different issues. So we've had a wonderful opportunity with an artist who actually approached us about helping tell the story of Edgehill. New Edgehill today, Edgehill 100 years ago. And so I did want to mention, this has been funded in part through the Thrive Grant. So if any of you don't know about this, it's an opportunity through Metro Arts where you can partner with artists to do a project in your neighborhood. And so this has been a great opportunity that came to us, and it's still happening. So we don't yet know how it will unfold, but what we've been doing is gathering residents together to tell their stories, to just share about the experience of living in the neighborhood. And the artist team are collecting all of those stories, and they'll actually be bringing them together into a performance piece that the neighbors will get to workshop, get to give feedback and say, yes, that feels like our neighborhood, or no, that doesn't feel right. And then it will culminate in a public performance where we'll get to share together. And I think it's just been a wonderful time, I think, for us to all get together and focus on the things that we really do have in common and the history that we're all incredibly proud of. The artists keep saying, yes, we've heard you're one of the oldest neighborhoods in Nashville. Yes, we've heard about, how you were settled, because everyone wants to tell you those stories, and we all have so much pride in that history. And some of the themes that I think have come out are just a sort of value of, I think, resiliency and friendship that has been true when you talk to neighbors who have lived in the neighborhood 70 years. They say, we remember how, we raised the kids like a village, and that kind of warmth and collaboration. And then you talk to residents who've been there 2 years, and they're saying the same thing. So the idea that there are things that are true throughout a neighborhood over time, it's just been a wonderful moment of coming together. So we're excited to see what will come out of it. The performances will be this summer, and we've been working also with our sister groups in Music Row and Organized Neighbors of Edgehill to do that. So
That's great. Thank you so much.
Casey, I'm just curious, how did you identify the people in your neighborhood to interview and to share?
That's a great question. A lot of different methods. I think, just talking to our neighbors, talking to the organizations. Of course, I think we all have, talking about the assets of a neighborhood, and this is something that's really about the human assets and the people. So there are a couple residents, I think immediately it came to mind that people said, well, you have to interview her or him, because their family's been in the neighborhood for generations. So some of those have been one-on-one interviews, and then community meetings that have been open. So those have also brought some nice surprises. And we, I think are fortunate to have great attendance at some of our community meetings. So it's been a little bit of kind of one-on-one outreach, and then also open calls, flyers, email newsletters, that kind of thing.
We might ask the same question of the first two people who talked as well. Freddie, and tell me your name again. Cynthia. Yeah. So how did you, Stacy, ask your question again so we can.
How did you identify who to speak with in your neighborhood?
Wow. Basically, just by talking to people that lived in the neighborhood and, listening to what they had to say. It's basically it.
And shared experience that came talking to the people actually living through some of the problems you had.
So I think some of it is just as being there for 8 years, I still feel like I just moved in, and it's funny how the sense of time in place changes. But you're there that long. We've got a neighbor who has been there probably closer to 50 years, and she grew up there. She actually went to the Fear School for elementary school, and then another neighbor of mine around the corner, it turns out, was unable to go there because it had not yet been desegregated and had to walk past the Fear School. So we kind of combined these stories in a dedication ceremony, and I think some of it is just listening, knowing your neighbors. We have done, as a neighborhood, several different full neighborhood canvases. We're a relatively small neighborhood, so you can knock out a whole in an afternoon. If you have 2 or 3 volunteers, you can go knock on everybody's door in the neighborhood. And I think most of us know at least the folks on our block, if not on several blocks in the neighborhood. And so you start to know who has been there for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, and the stories get more interesting, I think, as you find people that have a generation's worth of reflections on that place.
Yes. Thanks, Greg.
We have a block captain structure, essentially, in the group that's been really useful. And so I think 3 or 4 times a year, so we don't bombard everybody, but we will, go door to door and flyer, knock on doors. And like you said, it's still a small enough area that we've got a team of about 5 to 10 that we each just kind of take our area. And so you do, when you asked that question, I kind of thought, well, we know our neighbors, but that's great, but we probably didn't. I'd say 5 years ago, we wouldn't have had that answer. So I think we all thought about who are the people that we can bring to meetings, who are the people that we can go visit one-on-one.
And you adopted the block captain approach to be able to do that.
I was wondering if the two of you in particular found that the old timers were reluctant or resigned to hear these newcomers. How did you draw them out to be participants? Because sometimes it seems the news headlines said there is resistance. We can't afford to live with this new influx.
Well, I think when we're saying, tell us your story and tell us what you love about this neighborhood and why you live here, we found a lot of openness. So I think the fact that there's not any agenda, we're just telling a story, and we really want that story to be true to their experience. We've really found people really open up, and it's been a great way for that to then, I think, also inform future conversations in the neighborhood, where we can find those moments of shared value and commonality. So it's been a really nice bridging moment and better understanding, and you just get to know each other better as humans. And I think everything's so much easier when you have that in common. So.
And if I may add, at our community meetings that we hold 3 times a year, we always start off by having everyone stand up and say, well, if you've lived in the neighborhood 5 years or less, hold up your hand and then sit down. And then we do 10 years and hold up your hand and sit down. And then we get to the point where we can honor the people that have been there 50 years. And then we all clap and celebrate. And it's just a good way to say, look, you've been here 2 years, but we're here together. You've been here 45. I think we have someone who's been in over 60. Yeah, and I think who've been there for a long time, I think it's a nice way to honor and say, look, we know you've been here for a long time. We honor you. We honor that experience, and we can all just kind of work together with some enthusiasm and respect and a shared value. And we do that every meeting, and we always laugh, and it's always kind of a fun way to start the meeting. And we just keep doing it.
It's a contest.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. And then we're going to go to a work session. Yes.
Yeah, I think that the Edge Hill neighborhood, we do work with our partners that organize Neighbors of Edge Hill as well, and they cover, I think, 8th to overlap some with our neighborhood, and we really cover from 12th to Music Row, Wedgwood to kind of Division, so the area behind South Street, or about 14th, yeah, sort of 14th Avenue. Yeah.
Yes, Green Hills, no, Green Hills is behind you, so go ahead.
No, I was just curious. I know the way Nashville developed, there was a lot of places where there weren't sewer systems early, and it had to have huge yards for drainage for septic systems. So that results in very widespread neighbors. And people choose to sort of live there in part because they like big yards or something. And so I was wondering, and a lot of the people that we've, except for Cindy and Priest Lake, these are places where you see your neighbors,
Yeah,
right?
more densely populated.
Wondering if you all had suggestions for bringing people together who live by choice really far apart, and in part by choice and in part by geology. So I'd like to hear
Yes.
that. How did you do that?
Do any of you have suggestions? Anybody have a neighborhood like that they've been able to get people together on? Yes.
Share with you all how we got to know our neighbors. My wife from Detroit, I'm from Kentucky, and it took us 2 years to find a house in Enchanted Hills where we live now. And we was trying to figure out, I come from law enforcement, retired military, and we just kind of figure out how do you meet the right type of neighbors. And what we discovered, have a yard sale. People love yard sales. And right off the bat, you find out real quick which neighbors are pretty cool and which ones you hope don't come back to your yard sale. But it was really neat though, because the house we was in was vacant for a while. It was a family home, one of the first few houses built out there when they first started migrating out there. And we had to have an extra watch because people kept coming in our yard. We didn't know it was vacant so long, and people admired the house. We thought we had a lot of burglary criminal activity. So the police monitored for several months. And one girl came to the yard sale, and she said, "Oh, I just love this house. I just love it." I said, "I seen that car before, you know." She said, "Yeah, I come in y'all's driveway all the time looking at your house." And she peeps through the sun porch window. And I said, "Ma'am, we live here now. We've been there for almost 18 months at that time." I said, "Don't peep through our window." I said, "I'm a retired lawman, and I get real nervous when people go peeping through my window." But the yard sale was the corridor. We use it twice. Yard sale's a lot of work, but we really got to know who lived where, because our neighborhood, my yard is small, and it's an acre. A lot of neighborhoods, a lot of the yards are pretty big. So that do put, my fifth house is way down there. It's not around the cul-de-sac like we used to live in. So something like a yard sale, like with Freddie mentioned, they had a bunch of activities. That's a good way to get people to come out, and they checking you out too. So that makes a big difference.
Thank you so much. That's great. This proves, let's first a round of applause. Tell me your name. Jerry. Yeah, thanks to Jerry. This proves something that I believe about any group, and please take this back to your neighborhoods as well. I'll be right with Green Hills. Let me just say this one thing, and that is in any group you put together, you have the assets you need to bring about the change. You just have to find them. You have to give a space for people to share and to come together to find common ground and common good solutions. Kate, sorry.
And
Green Hill.
I was listening to Edge Hill, and you guys are so energized. And in Green Hills, we used to be really organized, and we used to do these things, and you get sort of, there's a cyclicality to it, and you get kind of worn out. And you know, you need to create the teams and pass the baton. And we had the block captains going, and if you lose momentum, it's tough to get it going again. But all right, I'm going to do better. But it is, we've been real successful, and we did during the winter holiday, like a Sunday night where everybody lit candles in paper bags, sand in paper bags with candles, and you just walked the neighborhood and hope for good weather. And if it worked, some years it worked well and some it didn't. And then there was a block party that last Sunday in August around Memorial Day, Labor Day. Those were sort of the annual events, and but I love the flamingos, Freddie. That's good. We'll do that.
We're going to see pink flamingos all over Nashville now. I'm going to go drive around where there's a pink flamingo. I'm going to go in for a party. Okay, now, let me just wrap up with what we've heard, and then you're going to do a group exercise. What I've heard from Edge Hill Village is that when you start getting stories from neighbors who have been there 18 months all the way up to neighbors who've been there 20 years or 30 years, you're going to find a common story. And that's the foundation for which you can build an organization. In the case of Edge Hill Village, it was, tell me again, that people, it was a neighborhood where you could walk your kids to school. It was.
Yeah, it was this idea, historically, that neighbors look out for neighbors.
Yes.
And raise each other's kids. Like, hey, you're not supposed to do that. Go along. You know, that there's this sense that we look out for each other, and that's always okay.
And people who moved there 2 years or had lived there 40 felt the same way. So that was that shared story. The other thing I heard as we were going around the room was that you have to be creative in how you initially get neighbors together. Sometimes gathering their stories will work. Sometimes luring them to a garage sale will work. Sometimes building around holidays that you know you can have some fun, whether it's Halloween or the December holidays, but also around a sense of purpose. When you talked about dedicating the school, that was a celebration of something that you had set a purpose and had achieved it. So think about all those things. Now, here's your assignment. For the next 10 minutes, we're going to ask you to do the two things that are so key to moving ahead. Most of you have already worked on a vision. For those of you who are here for the first time, we'll be glad to refer you back and help you as you look at a vision for your neighborhood. But just as a reminder, the vision is a concrete picture of the future. It's not what you're going to do. It's what your neighborhood looks like if you are successful. And in order to write that vision, you're going to have to decide what is the first most important priority that we have to address as the next thing in order to move to a strategy to achieve the vision. So what are you building that vision around? Is it a huge opportunity the neighborhood has? Is it a foundational issue? Is it just being able to get the neighbors together and activate it again? Or is it somewhere in between? Is it a challenge from losing a historic building? Or is it a challenge that you have an influx of new neighbors into your neighborhood, and you have to figure out a way to bridge the old and the new neighbors? But maybe it's a challenge of safety. We can't do anything else until we work with Metro and with our precinct to get our neighborhood safe. But what is the next thing that you have to focus on to begin to build your neighborhood and create the future that you want? So, for those of you who didn't bring your vision back or don't have it, just think about it, write it down if you want to. But the key thing I want you to write down is, what is the most important problem or opportunity that you have to address to move your neighborhood forward? And then the second thing, first priority, and the second thing is either who or what is a story you can tell. That is it about a person or about the history of your neighborhood? What is the story you can tell that will help you move on that priority? What is the story you can tell? Some of you, so there are other people who brought stories today. And then afterwards, we're going to look at your priorities, look at your stories, and we're going to help you shape an argument for the people in your neighborhood or other people in the city you need to persuade. So this is real simple. It is not, almost nothing I do is rocket science, but this is really not rocket science. Just put down the first thing that comes to mind that either is an opportunity or a problem in your neighborhood. The thing you know has to be addressed. And then second, is there somebody who can articulate it? Is there some symbol that is the symbol of it? It sounds like she just left, so it sounds like there was a symbol of crime and litter around the lake that had to be dealt with before you could move ahead in that neighborhood. So if this were 2 years ago, that would have been the first priority for that neighborhood. But what's the first priority for yours right now? I think people got mixed up. Some people are sitting together, some aren't.
We have it divided into police precincts.
Are you looking
today
for a particular neighborhood?
We're organized by police precinct. Okay.
No, the question is this a group exercise or individual? It is an individual exercise unless you are sitting with people that are from the same neighborhood and you want to work together to set the priority. But so many of you are either here only as one or two, that if you need to do it as an individual exercise, please do. I think most of you will be doing it individually. And we're here to help answer questions. If you raise your hand, we'll come around. And if you will find at your table, there should be enough for everyone to have a copy of the summary of the mayor's neighborhood leadership training, because we're going to be answering some of these questions. And this is also a guide for you as you think about how to use the tools we've given you. Okay, so we've already talked about who am I, who are you as leaders. You really care about leadership, that's why you're here. You want to get to be better at it, and we've given you tools to do that. Then who are we? You've thought about what the assets are in your community that you can use. And then finally, what can we do together? What can we do together? And that's where identifying this priority and then building a vision around it is so important, and then using the stories that you have and the facts and the data that you have from your neighborhood to help make the case to the people who have to help you. Everyone from your neighbors and the people in your organization, to people outside the neighborhood, to the businesses that may want to move into your neighborhood, to the MMPS and other metro agencies. So you've got to be able to work with all of those to achieve your vision. So let's start. Who would like to talk about their number one priority that they have to focus on in order to move forward? Okay, thank you. Tell us who you are and from what neighborhood.
I'm Pauline Wilson, and I'm from the Hermitage Estates neighborhood. And we've had actions within the neighborhood that have created really a very strong force of people that moved us into this situation, okay, which I just told you about. I think we've come to the conclusion that we've got a really strong core of people in there. And I've just started with the nextdoor.com that is now going to move us forward and connect all of our neighbors. We've got so many new people moving in as the older folks are dying off, you know. So I think this is where we're going to go. I mean, it's a sad thing to say, but it's very true. Ruth is in my neighborhood. She's been in there, how long, Ruthie? 50 years on average. The neighbors in there on, 50 years.
Okay.
So now we're having a lot of new families move in as the houses are selling. So now we're going to try and reconnect everybody and get ourselves organized. We've got 2 great schools right smack in the middle of our community, DuPont Tyler Middle School and Tulip Grove Elementary. So we've got the perfect scenario now to get set up and going.
That's great. So reaching out, unifying, and organizing are the first thing you have to do. And after that, you can see what that group wants to do together, right? But first, you have to organize them and unify them, and you've heard of a lot of great ways to do that here. Nextdoor is a great way to use it. The one thing I will say about technology is it always has to be matched with some kind of in-person contact. You can use technology to get people to the square. Remember the Arab Spring idea, where all of the people in the Arab world suddenly began to protest and organize using Twitter and Facebook. Well, the argument there is you could use Twitter and Facebook to get people to the square in Egypt or in Iran. You could get them there, but it was really hard to tell them what to do through technology. And so the argument that Malcolm Gladwell and others make is use technology to get people together, but then you have to do what happened in the 60s in the church basements in the South, and that is you have to train people how to be leaders and how to bring about change in person. So there are 2 things. Technology is a powerful new tool, but you have to also do that shoe leather kind of organizing that some people were talking about here today. Okay, so you've got that basic organizing priority. Another priority. I saw another hand somewhere. Okay, good. Tell us who you are and what neighborhood.
I'm Robbie Jones. I'm with Greenwood in East Nashville. And the big issue is that we need to reactivate our neighborhood association. It's pretty dormant, and I think that we have an influx of newcomers into the neighborhood, including myself, who don't understand where to go. I came from Inglewood. Inglewood had a very active, strong, well-formed neighborhood association. We're all over the place, and Greenwood just seems to be non-existent, and so that's our number one issue right now. And it's the impetus to get us started, I think, is redevelopment pressure, new housing, commercial development, and lots of things are moving and actions taking place. You can walk down streets, and every couple of weeks there's a new house going up and an old house going down. So right now I don't think there's a central voice for the neighborhood to say this is good, bad, or different. And so our who, I guess, would be the old leaders in the neighborhood association that may still be around. We needed to identify them, but we also obviously need some fresh blood and some fresh ideas and sort of kickstart things.
And one of the challenges that you have when you're a new group coming into a neighborhood and you want to re-energize is what?
finding out the history, right? Because that history is something that it's always better to build on than to suddenly just start something new. So I hear two different kinds of organization that need to happen here, and I would strongly urge you to talk to Courtney about getting a coach from a neighborhood that has done this well. And there's a list of coaches both online, and Erin and Courtney can match you up with coaches who will help you do this. Now, the tools we have online are simply that, they're tools. There's nothing better than having a coach who's done it before, who can kind of walk you through it, but it doesn't hurt to look at some of the exercises and other things that we've put online that might help you at least identify the steps you need to take next in organizing. Okay? We're going to come back because I'm going to challenge this group when you're putting together your story next, the argument, is you need to develop the argument to the people who have been there for a long time to help you re-energize the organization. It sounds like you've got a lot of the new people ready to move, right? So think about how, well, you can come up with two arguments then. One for the new people who've come in and another for those who've been there for a long time, okay? Somebody else. Somebody who has a challenge that goes beyond the foundation of the organization. Okay, Mike?
My name is Mike Norris. My neighborhood is Creekside of Brentwood. We're a townhouse community at Nippers Corner, about 150 or so townhouse units. The concern that I have is that we have a very valuable piece of common land that belongs to a homeowners association. Happens to be a transmission right-of-way, a high-voltage transmission line that runs through our neighborhood, which I think is a really valuable piece of land that could be turned into a great asset to increase the quality of life and also to increase the property values in our neighborhood. I have made several attempts to approach our existing board of directors of a homeowners association and not been welcomed with open arms. I've been asked to prove that that land belongs to the homeowners association, which I think is ridiculous since we're paying taxes on it anyway. But my goal for this valuable piece of land, the opportunity is right, the timing is right. It ties in with a existing greenway that's on Edmondson Pike. I think it's Whitman Park. There's a greenway there near the agricultural center that is planned to be continued on that same transmission route right through our neighborhood. And I've talked with some people in the city in the Greenway department, and they tell me that they're more than willing to work with us to make this a reality. We can get a greenway, a playground very similar to Whitman Park, and also one of the big problems in our neighborhood is the developer provided virtually no parking. So if you have a visitor, you've got to park in front of a fire hydrant or a post office box, or convince your neighbor he doesn't need to get out of his driveway.
So let me stop you right there. So, because it sounds like you've got a lot of priorities there, but you have a vision. And thank y'all for letting me sit down. If I don't, I'm going to not be able to walk later today. So thank you for letting me do that. But Mike, it sounds to me, and see, I learn a little bit more every time you come to one of these. It sounds to me like your very first priority is to do two things: is to figure out a way to prove that your homeowners association owns the land, and second, to make the argument to the homeowners association that the land can be used for the purpose and to create the vision that you have for it. So sometimes it helps just to sit down and say, well, this sounds really wonderful over here, this vision that I want, but there's something I have to do first to even get the thing kick-started. And that's what I've been asking y'all to think about in terms of that very next step, that priority you have to focus on. Okay, who else? Yes.
Is find out about the utility easement that is on that property. Because if you got major transmission lines, they're going to have an easement along the entire corridor. And that's going to limit what you can do.
And this is where, let's don't get into the weeds on this, but this is exactly where you need to have a talk with other people about how they've actually dealt with this. It sounds like you've got somebody sitting next to you who understands that. But make sure that you've answered all those questions before you get in front of your homeowners association, right? The easiest way to table something is to say we don't have enough information yet. Right? So you want to make sure that you are completely equipped when you go in there. Okay, did I see another hand? Yes, right here. Take the mic.
I'm Anthony Etheridge. I'm the president of the Gold Key Neighborhood Homeowners Association. I live in the Bordeaux-Clarksville Highway area off of Kings Lane. I think our next step is to see the widening of Clarksville Highway come to fruition. We anticipate that seeing that development occur will draw more development in our area, and we'll begin to see restaurants and other resources that we most desperately need in that area come up into that area, and they'll be attracted to come. We have an array of assets and a number of homeowners associations in the area, but most of us have to drive to Green Hills or Rivergate or someplace like that to just sit down and have a nice meal and get a chance to meet and mingle with each other. And this would be a great opportunity to do that.
So I love what you've done there, because in one statement, you've given us a vision of a neighborhood that is vibrant with businesses and restaurants and a place where people can not only live but play and work. But the first step that has to happen, or at least one of the major steps that has to happen for that vision to come to life, sounds like it's two things. One is you've got a number of neighborhood associations, so you need them to work together, right? And remember, we talked earlier about how we're stronger together, particularly if neighborhoods that can benefit from the same thing can come together like yours can. And then the most important thing is, who do you have to persuade? You know, what's the timeline that it may take to get the Clarksville Highway widened, and what can you be doing to first make it happen and then be planning with developers and businesses and others the kind of neighborhood that you want built there. Right. But the very first step is, if you've determined this, the very first step is, how do those homeowner associations come together, and what steps do they take? Who do they need to talk with? Who has to approve the widening of the highway? I don't know if it's a state highway. Is it a state highway?
It's a state.
Okay, so you're going to have multiple stakeholders and multiple authorities that you're going to need to present to in order to make that happen. Right. And we're going to talk in a minute. Your assignment is to develop, when we go into the next work session, develop the beginning of an argument to one of those authorities about why the Clarksville Highway needs to be widened. Okay? And part of it is thinking about...
We also recently established a Bordeaux business coalition, and some of the neighborhood associations already have worked with the homeowners associations and have met with the Tennessee Department of Transportation.
Great. So the work has started.
Already, yes.
Yeah, and so having the neighbors really supported as well, in addition to the businesses, is going to be really important. Right. Anybody have anything to recommend here? Yes, that you've worked with before to achieve this kind of change?
We had a problem not too long ago on Bell Road. About 6 years ago, I identified that Bell Road was being used as a major conduit for truck traffic because of the new airport complex. I also had become privy to the fact that Bell Road was not supposed to be improved until 2025. I've been working with several agencies in the county, from Public Works, the mayor's office, et cetera, to get that project moved up. And I'm happy to say that this summer, part of Bell Road did get done early because I identified it. But one of the things I have to say on these big projects that you're contemplating, first you need to identify what agencies are actually involved in the process you're trying to move forward, and figure out who the players are at those agencies to help you get that project achieved. And then your next step would be to find out who it's going to impact when this project is actually done, and bring those people on board so that they understand that what you're going to do is actually going to be an improvement to the situation and not a detriment.
That's great. That's wonderful. And identifying the stakeholders and the people who are actually going to make the decision, but also who affects them. Not just organizing your neighborhood, but who are the people that they actually listen to as well. It sounds like the two of you need to talk because there's some resources that you won't have to spend a lot of time finding if you talk with each other and with people who've already had to do some of the things that you want to launch. Okay, somebody else? I can't see you all, so I'm gonna have to stand up. Anybody else with a priority? You don't want me to call on you, do you? Green Hills, what's your priority? Re-energizing. So we got 3 here who really want to do something. You've had an active one before, you want to re-energize, you're bringing new people in because you are new to the neighborhood, you want to re-energize, and you are bringing people together with technology because you need, coming off of the crisis, that's all I'm going to call it, coming off of the crisis, now you're unified, so what can you do next? You know, Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, was once quoted saying, "Never waste a good crisis." So if you have come together around something that was not positive, use that organization and move forward. And in fact, you know, there was a little bit of that as you were talking about Salem Town. You know, that you came together around something and then were able to have a little fun after it, right? Pink flamingos. What?
We had crime before, that always ensures.
Well, there's a reason that crime and safety is at the top of the list of what comes in when you are asked what's important to you. Okay, so we've done what's your number one priority. Over the last several sessions, we've talked about how do you create a vision. Remember, that's the future. That's a picture of the future. That's not what you're going to create to actually get there. So it's not the neighborhood organization. That's not your vision. Your vision is a safe, walkable neighborhood where neighbors take care of neighbors. Or a safe, walkable neighborhood where people can take their children to school, play, work, and neighbors take care of neighbors. So, but it's got to be built around that common story that you find as you talk to people in your neighborhood. Not everybody is going to have the Edge Hill Village vision. You're going to have something different that is unique to you. And that becomes your brand. And we talked a little bit about brand last time. We're not going to get into it now. But I do have this crazy exercise that you can take back and use with your organization if you want to. Now, it's going to sound silly, but it works, I promise you. And that is, if your neighborhood were a brand, a consumer brand, if your neighborhood were a consumer brand, what would it be? So if you are filled with greenways and walkable space and you're all about the environment and you're very responsible and stable as a neighborhood, you could be Patagonia, right? You see the idea? And it begins to help you think about your neighborhood in a different kind of way. And it's also kind of fun to have people, you know, think through. Somebody else, what have y'all determined what you are over there? You got to share. If you're laughing, you got to share.
We're the Geritol neighborhood.
Oh, me. That's it. That, I won't even comment on that. You have left me speechless. Okay, so that's one exercise you can use with yourself and others to think about your brand. But really, your brand is going to come back to that common story. And to a certain extent, if it can, your brand is going to help you move toward the vision that you want. Is the Nations here today? Oh, that's right. Okay, so we worked with the Nations on their brand because they had such history there, but they also had a misunderstanding about what the name the Nations meant. And so it meant different things to different people. So the really important job of a neighborhood association as you move to create a vision is people have to have a common language and a common understanding of who you are. So that comes to be part of your brand as well. And I feel as if 4 sessions is not enough to really do what we want to do with everybody. And so I've told Courtney that we will be available to you, not necessarily for long meetings, but I am more than happy to have phone conversations or a short meeting with some of you as you begin to put together your vision, your brand, and your action plan. Okay, so now you have your purpose. Anybody else want to, your priority, first priority. Anybody else want to share their first priority before we go to the next piece of this work session? Nobody else? Is it because you don't have them or you just don't want to share them? Yes, okay. Geritol neighborhood.
We live in a condo complex, and it occurred to me as we're going through this, the problem always is please pick up your poop and cigarette butts. I'm in condo complexes, that's a big deal. But going through this process, why aren't people picking up after their dog or throwing the, and just the way ours is set up, there's a long green space of front yards, but everybody goes in and out their back because that's where the garages are. I think that's a pretty common setup for condos or apartments. And that front area isn't one that they take any sense of pride in. It's landscaped for us. We just, oh, the trees are pretty. But I think if we could create a sense of this entire strip is your front yard, that maybe then there would be more compliance or consideration for those other two issues. So the problem really isn't the poop. Well, it is, but the real problem is there isn't a sense of shared ownership of the green spaces in the condo area.
That's great, and two things here, all right? The first is you came up with a great symbol. What's the name of your condo association? Okay, so it's Highland Villa's front yard, right? It is not just an individual's front yard, it's Highland Villa's front yard. But the other thing you hit on is something that while we're going to talk about motivating people, there's a scholar at Stanford named B.J. Fogg who argues, and some of you heard this I think in the first session, who argues that we spend maybe a little too much time on motivation and not on the other key part of how you bring about behavior change. And that is, do people even have the ability to do what you are trying to motivate them to do? So he argues you have to have a balance of the two. Yes, you have to persuade. Yes, you have to use motivation. But maybe the most motivated person in the world doesn't have the ability to do what you're asking them to do. And so in the case where I thought where you were going was that you needed to figure out a way to not only motivate them, but also to make sure that they have the ability to pick up the poop, right? That's, and to do it in maybe an organized way like they do in New York. Anybody ever lived in New York? You always see people with their bags that are branded bags with them as they walk their dog. Because if you don't pick up after your dog in New York, you're fined. Now, I'm not suggesting that you fine, but you could have some kind of branded way. I never thought I'd be talking about this today, by the way. That you have a branded way for you to see that you've given people the ability, but also people know if they're doing it, right? Because if you don't have your bag, you're breaking the rules. So Anyway, so give them the ability. I'd love to come up with a different example of also giving them the ability.
At Shelby Park, I think they now have dispensers for bags, they're like green bags that dispense out of a little thing that because there's so many dog people at Shelby Park, that you can pull one of those bags out when you go in with your dog, and you can pick your stuff, and then trash cans. So just the infrastructure you might need would be helpful.
Metro Parks. Metro Parks has these. Think about them. I think the group genius in this room has figured out a way to deal with this. Okay, let's take, what time is it? How much time do I have? Okay, no, I have till 11:45, right? Okay, all right, so we're gonna, unless we want to break early. I am happy to break early. Let's just ask them, let's ask for one more thing from you. Yes?
I had a very wise boss tell me once that not everybody's commitment to the job is the same. I was a very high energy committed person, and the person I was complaining about at the time wasn't. But what I didn't understand is this person had another job as well as the one that they were working at. So I'm thinking that as you're trying to solve these issues in your communities, you need to figure out what kind of commitment level that individuals have and work with dealing with them from that standpoint. The issue that we were just discussing, sometimes you have people that just flat out don't care. So what you do is you use the resources available to you. The law is very clear on the issue of dog poop, by the way. You are required to pick up after your animal. You can address this issue from a homeowner standpoint with your HOA sending a letter to an individual if you know that you have repeat offenders. And if that doesn't work, then get animal control involved. It's the same thing with any other issue that you're working in your community. Identify how you can make the person come into compliance with whatever the issue happens to be at the lowest level possible. That way you don't create hostility.
I think that's a great idea, and it also gets to the point of, you know, you are close to the ground. You know your neighbors, and asking them to comply is one thing. Making it part of the community spirit is another. You know, I think compliance is always a word that people sometimes react negatively to. So if you can turn it around as part of the vision, I think that's really important. All right, 5 minutes, and I can't believe that this example is the one that's going to dominate today. But here is what. Yes, ma'am. Yes, please do.
Yes, we actually have banners, a banner display program that has banners that speak to those specific issues. So during homeowner association meetings or even a common area where you all can create a visual presence, we certainly have those banners that you can post. And again, like you said, that's a non-confrontational way to keep the community engaged. And it speaks to a larger concern as far as keeping the community and the environment safe, clean, and clear. So again, we get a chance to address it from a localized perspective, but also broadening the vision.
Great, and tell us those 3 words, because it sounded like the mantra of your department, to keep the environment safe, clear, clean, and...
Yes, because ultimately everything that we put on the ground lands in our streams and ultimately back into our water source. And so it makes it even more difficult, not necessarily difficult, but it causes us to have to treat the water more, or a number of other issues that it may cause. But again, this will give the community an opportunity to, like you said, take a sense of ownership. And it's not just from the community perspective, but again, from an environmental stance.
Great, and this is a good example of how to use the contacts. Many of you already have them, but how to use the contacts you have within Metro to bring them into your community and your community organization meetings. Okay, because sometimes an outside expert, you know, unfortunately, I used to say there's a 100-mile rule, right? If the expert comes in from beyond 100 miles. They're smarter than everybody in the room. But you really, want to make sure that you're using the assets that you have here who can be the credible sources to get people to change. Okay, we're going to talk about Monroe's motivated sequence. You have a piece of paper in front of you. It can be a guide, and I encourage you to use this in your work as well as in your community and neighborhood association work communication. Okay, so what Monroe says, and this has been used for really over 40 years as a way to adapt everybody's best persuasion ideas. Okay, the first thing is you have to pull people in with a hook. You've got to have an attention getter. In the case of something that's the law, you could begin right away with, it's the law. Or you could begin with, did you know it's the law? And then, kind of assume for a minute they don't know they're breaking the law. Or in the case, and I'll use one that I use with my students, did you know that 1 in 4 girls in Middle Tennessee will be sexually abused in her lifetime? That's a hook, right? That's a hook that pulls people in. So you want to get their attention in some way. Now, people respond in different ways to different types of things. If you're talking to someone who deals only in facts and numbers and data, right? They don't really care about stories and big vision or relationships and how it's going to affect people or even how you're going to get it done. They just want to know what the numbers and the data are. Then your hook, you want to lead with numbers and data. Right? You want to get them in that way. If your person is a big picture person that you're trying to persuade and they really think about the future, then you want to lead with your vision. You want to lead with, do you know what we could create? Here's the vision of Edge Hill Village that we could create. You want to start with a story. If you don't use the vision, you could start with, staying with the domestic abuse and sexual abuse theme, you could use a story that said she lived across the street from him and he made her one of the 1 in 4 girls in Middle Tennessee who was sexually abused. So you've told it in a story. Okay. You've grabbed people with a story. And then finally, there are the process people and the relationship people. They want you to lead with how it's going to bring people together, how it's going to affect the people in the neighborhood, or for the process folks, they want to know that you've got a plan. They want to know if somebody else has done this before and how they got it done. So there are different kinds of people that you'll be communicating with, and your hook can start with whatever way you think you can best get their attention. Okay, so your hook. The need. We've identified the need for parking and greenway space for Mike. We've identified the need to come together now that we've weathered this crisis, the need to come together. Yes.
Yes. I'm a process person, and I like to have a big picture vision and a plan, the who, what, why, when, where, and how.
Yes.
But we've got some folks, and I know some folks, and I don't know how to hook the folks who say, for example, that's the hill we want. Let's plant a flag on it. Come on, everybody, let's go to that hill. And that's very motivating and enthusiasm-generating and engaging. It might leave us with less long-term sustainability than I'd like to see.
Oh, that's right. And the thing is, you'll never get to the hill if you don't have a plan to get there, right? So my ex-military man here is nodding, yes, right? You won't ever have an after-action plan if you don't take action, right? So one of the things that, I think, tell me your name. Keith, yes, Keith, we talked on the phone, yes. Good to see you. So I think, one of the things you really have to do if you're talking to somebody, and this is almost anybody, who wants to see their place in your vision, even though we're going to end with a call to action in the sequence, you may, with some people, need to start with one. I need your help to take the hill, all right? I need your help to take the hill. The reason we need to take it is this, and boy, here's what the future is going to look like when we get there. So you've got the hook, the punch, yes, sir.
Yeah.
John.
When we're talking in neighborhoods organizing, there's one piece that comes before the hook, and that really is getting to know the person that you're talking to.
So you know what's going to hook them.
What's going to hook them.
This assumes, all right, this communicating with people assumes that you've gotten to the point that you know your neighbors and you're getting ready to move them toward a vision. Because you really can't do it if you don't know the people in the neighborhood. And the first 3 sessions we talked about different ways to do that. But now, if you get to the point that you know them well enough that you are now about to engage them, this is one way you can do this. I'm going to quickly go through them, and then I'm just going to ask you for 3 or 4 minutes to write something down. We're going to close out with a call to action to all of you to go forth and do good. And so after the hook, and it's very short. You just have to get their attention. And then the second is, what's the problem? What's the cause? What's the opportunity? And then next, I've got the solution, or we as a neighborhood have the solution. And this is where you tell the stories again. This is where you can envision a future of a neighbor or of a school or of a walkable neighborhood, but that's where you begin to show them a picture or a symbol. And then finally, after solution and visualization, you have a call to action. Don't ever have a speech, a conversation, an organizational meeting that does not end with a call to action. You have to know what the next step is you need the people with you to do in order to be successful. Okay, so you've got 4 minutes to do that, and then we'll close. Yes.
I was going to say something about hooks. I've learned through experience and instruction from much wiser people, they need to be short and sweet. Like a lot of people come to your door and they want to tell the backstory. You know, here's how we got where we are. And I'm like, just tell me the hook. I want to know why you're here in 15 words or less. And I've been told the same thing, Robbie, just give them 15 words or less, and then they can decide if they're interested or not.
The net takeaway. Yeah, that's right. Ted Sorensen says you need to have clarity, charity, brevity, and levity when you talk to somebody. So, clarity, charity, brevity, and levity. And brevity and clarity are cousins. If you want to be clear, you need to be brief. Okay, so take a few minutes, and then we will close out. Choose someone you need to persuade about the issue in your neighborhood and see if you can develop this. And by the way, this is an elevator speech. It should be no longer than 2 or 3 minutes. Everybody's going, oh, no. No, but it should be very short. I'd like to ask one of you, just one, to give us your Monroe's motivated sequence for making an argument to a stakeholder you've identified. I love that you're still talking, and I wish we had more time. But if I could get one of you to report out, and then we'll talk about next steps based on this, the great work of the Metro Departments and the Metro Department of Neighborhoods. So, one person? Nobody wants to report out. You really, thank you, Edge Hill Village. Yes, okay.
One of the things we were talking about is that there are lots of little neighborhood associations that are experiencing some of the same things. So I know that we've reached out to Salem Town, now we're Wedgwood Houston, and we're learning some of the great things that other neighborhood associations are doing and also some of their challenges, but their solutions. So one of the things that we thought about is kind of getting a group of neighborhoods together to start problem solving, sharing, so we're not reinventing the wheel on a lot of these things, so that we can learn from each other.
Oh, that is great. That's great. So I would say the hook on that is you don't have to do it alone. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. we're all going to get together and share our best practices, right? Okay, that's great. That's great. And come join us, the call to action, right? And I didn't see you sitting there, Wedgwood Houston. I am a snap. So if you want, I'll call on you to give your kind of vision for Wedgwood Houston and how you are convincing people to join in. And if you don't want to, that's okay, but I would like you to. Thank you. I didn't see you sitting there.
Yeah, just as we were talking, we do have a lot of sort of the same problems, just going back to interconnectivity between neighborhoods. We all have sort of the same needs, same desires, same directions as sort of, local, sharing the same space neighborhoods. So if we could meet together, spaced out, quarterly, something like that, just to brainstorm, see how we're working, solving different problems together. We certainly create a more united, we certainly have more names on the back of the jersey, I guess you could say. So that was something we were discussing. As far as Wedgwood Houston, one of our big issues, of course, with everything else is just how can we promote responsible growth and development, and take pride in the history that is our neighborhood and make sure that's continuing throughout what we're developing right now. So a couple of the measures we've taken is we do, so last summer a large group of folks, and it was led by Colby, organized a council on affordable living, and we basically brainstormed ideas, everything from green living to affordable housing, to recreation and anything like that. Basically ideas that the neighborhood stands behind and would like to see continue throughout whatever growth and development happens right now and moving forward. So we actually have a document that we can share and look at and say, these are sort of some ideas that we'd like to move forward on or continue to look at. So I think that's something we're doing.
That's a great idea, too.
Neighborhoods can do it. Just list out things that you like, things that you would like to encourage people to reinvest in that you already have, maybe some assets that you already have in your neighborhood that with a new development or a new project can reinvest in that asset already and grow it so that the whole neighborhood has more pride in it.
So the credibility that comes from having brought your neighborhood together and actually produced a document that you can give to developers is huge because it gives developers something from a single voice of the neighborhood, right? Okay, this is great. I don't know if, Courtney, did you hear that they want to meet quarterly? Okay. So what has come out of this is, hey, this group, or the group of all the neighborhood's leadership, has a real group genius that they can share with each other. Yes, John?
Yeah, I just want to throw in the fact that the neighborhood movement here in town started 40 years ago with Organized Neighbors of Edge Hill. And the coalition of neighborhoods started 30 years ago, and it's called the Nashville Neighborhood Alliance. And it had its ups and downs, just like everybody goes through a cycle, but it's on its up cycle at this point. And then there's regional. Donaldson Hermitage Neighborhood Association, where different neighborhoods that live in the same area come together to solve problems. So we already have some structures already in place to facilitate.
And the Neighborhood Resource Center and others that have different trainings and sessions that you can access. And I think the important thing is to go back, John, thanks so much, the fact that it is great. It's a great time to be a neighborhood leader in Nashville. But one reason is because Nashville has always, in the last 50 years, had amazing neighborhood leaders that you can learn from and build on the best practices that they've brought in. So I'm going to challenge you to do two things. One is assess the resources that are available to you, including the ones that John just mentioned. Tap into Courtney and Aaron and the Office of Neighborhoods and the resources that are posted there. Get yourself a neighborhood coach. Go forth and create your vision and an action plan. And I'm a professor, so I'd love to tell you to come back and report in a year. But and who knows, you may get an invitation from the Andrews Institute to come back and report in a year. But for right now, I'm just going to encourage you with a call to action to use what we've attempted to share with you here and go strengthen Nashville's amazing neighborhoods. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you so much to the Andrews Institute. They've been just a wonderful partner. And to all of you guys, it was great to hear all the stories today. And we will work with, talk to the Neighborhood Alliance, NRC, and a few of the others and see if we can set up something quarterly and maybe a partnership. So love the suggestion. So could everybody give yourselves another round of applause? So great. Thank you so much. And we really, really appreciate you guys coming. Those who did the 4 sessions, 3 sessions, 2 and 1, please go online, please use those materials, and please use us as a resource. We're here to help you guys. So thank you so much and enjoy this beautiful Saturday.